Anita Campbell, based in Naples, Florida, is the wildly successful, and I don't usually say that kind of thing, publisher of small business trends and other online properties that now command over 4 million views a month. She is the author of the book Visual Marketing, which is, yeah, I know, what is visual marketing? Well, it is nearly 100 tips for small businesses showing them how to use visual elements in their marketing. This is what I haven't read it in a bit, but one that stands out for me still was it was a burger joint, and they used the actual messaging on the paper that the hamburgers were wrapped in to further tell their story. So of course, the taste and the mouthfeel of the burger is central, but making sure people know what the place is all about, they continued that message on the paper. She is also a former, and I would say at this point, fully recovered corporate lawyer in a former life who is totally in love with what she does now, which is both being an entrepreneur and working with other entrepreneurs as they grow their businesses themselves. So, Anita, I know to some extent the answer to this, but our listeners here don't. How did you end up in your current enviable state with a digital empire that serves small business people and entrepreneurs? And I know you aim to serve only small business people, but what I've seen myself actually as well, and I've experienced myself, is some of them start out small, but they stay with small business trends, which we lovingly abbreviate as what your URL is, which is small biz, B-I-Z trends. How did you end up in this? I've heard you kind of self-deprecatingly call yourself an accidental publisher. Can that really be true?
Yes. Well, Micah, first of all, thank you for having me today on this interview. This is like awesome. I love getting together
You're
with you.
welcome. And we should also thank our sponsor, Nextiva. Now, we are not going to do any hard sell for Nextiva at all, but I will tell you that we're both friends of the brand. In fact, Anita has been on the advisory panel where Nextiva, which doesn't only want to hear good news, will ask power users how they can improve their products, including one they're very passionate about right now, their platform, which they call NextOS. So when they want like the down and dirty on how entrepreneurs are using their products, they come to Anita. So I'm sure Nextiva is very grateful to you, and you're welcome that you're being on this. Thanks.
Well, it's a great product. Yeah, so the accidental publisher, that's what you could call me. I mean, I never expected in my wildest dreams that I would be running an online business publishing, but here I am. And the way I got started was I had left the corporate world. I was doing a little consulting and I wanted to set up an email newsletter. And I thought, I'll write these articles that have great tips in them. And, thinking, wow, I've got wonderful things to say, right? And I wanted to get that out there in this email newsletter, but I had to publish the articles online. I was struggling to get these articles online. I mean, I was using Dreamweaver and I was setting up HTML pages. And someone said to me, have you ever heard of a blog? You should try it. And so I did. I went over to blogger.com. I started a blog. I was amazed the first day that, I just hit the button, publish, and there I was. I had published something online. So putting out this newsletter became very easy. Well, fast forward, not long after that, I mean, maybe 6 months, I realized I had more people reading these articles that were coming directly to the blog at the time from search engines and online versus those reading the newsletter. And so I thought, maybe there's something to this publishing stuff. And that's how I became a publisher.
And at that point, or I know these things don't happen overnight unless you're out of your mind, but at that point, corporate law, it started to seem like something in the rearview mirror for you. I mean, a lot of us would say, well, security is a good thing, but there's more to life than that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the freedom. And I'll tell you, I loved the law and I love my legal training. It has really held me in good stead in the business world. But as a lawyer, you're often just advising a business person. And I never really could make the decision. And I would see situations that I would think, oh, I could do that in business. I'd love to do that. I could make that decision. And so that's what enticed me to get into the business side. And I love it.
Now, when could you put a fork in small business trends and finally breathe, knowing it was at least on some level of success?
Never. No.
That is a good example, a good answer. And I to be a little less negative about what a great answer that is. There's a musician I love. His name is, to some people they'll find him obscure, but his name is Richard Thompson. I think he's 70 now. And a music interviewer asked him, when did you do your best work? And he said, not yet. And I thought that was a great answer. So anyway, you can never be secure in the line of work you're in.
Well, that's not exactly true, but you do have to keep improving all the time. Well, that with the line of work that you're in, things change around you. Nothing stays static. Your customers change, or in our case, it's our readers. They change. Their needs change, their tastes change. Conditions around us change. I mean, who would have imagined we'd have had this pandemic over the past year? So we saw that what people were interested in was totally different over the past year. And now it's returning more to normal, but it was just a very unique situation. And so you have to constantly react. You have to know your data. That's first and foremost. And you have to look at your data. I mean, not just have it, but you actually have to spend time
Well, that is
with it.
totally true.
Yes. And I'm shocked sometimes at people who don't really want to read reports or something, because I feel like there's gold in them, their reports. You know what I mean? Because it tells you a lot of things. I mean, it tells us what people are interested in, which articles and topics hit the mark with readers. So we want to do more of those. And which ones, no matter how great an idea we thought it was. I mean, I do this a lot. I'm interested in something. I think it's a great idea. Well, apparently I'm the only person on the planet who actually was interested in that topic, because nobody else is interested. But on the other hand, I'll look sometimes at something that we've published on the site, and I'll think, gee, what were we thinking publishing that? And that thing will like blow up. It will be like the most popular article for a month. You can't assume. You have to dig in and try to understand what your customers want.
I was just listening to you, and I'm not totally in love with reading reports myself. And I was thinking, what is the solution? I think if that's who you are, maybe it's to accept it and to have a lieutenant who doesn't just send you them, but say, listen, I want you to pick out for me what you think's essential for me to be paying attention to. I mean, maybe that's part of the solution.
No, that's a great suggestion, Micah, because it does a lot of things. I mean, not only does it deal with perhaps your weakness. If you are not someone who's into reports, you get someone who is strong where you are weak. But, you're training the people under you to understand the business better. You're training them to make, decisions and analyze things. So I think it's a terrific idea.
What's so really interesting to me is you hear from entrepreneurs all the time. How did their concerns change during COVID, and how, probably more interesting at this point, do you expect them to change again as we're hopefully moving onward?
Well, as you might imagine, one thing that was heavily in demand was anything about SBA loans or any of the loan programs, PPP loans, economic injury disaster loans, anything like that. that was just off the charts. People were obviously interested in that. But here's something that I found really interesting: our sales content. So, sales tips, how to sell, and things like that, how to manage a sales force, when your salespeople are not in the office with you, that sort of thing, distributed sales force. That kind of content was off the charts as well, because small businesses were clearly thinking about, I've still got to keep selling. I've got to do this. Now, what has changed, I think, a little bit since then, well, not a little bit, but it's actually changed a lot, is there's a lot of interest now in starting a business, which is very interesting.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's so much pent up demand, first of all, that people are saying, hey, we see something that, customers, consumers want. Let's give it to them. We can start a business. I also think there's this sense of freedom that people developed during the pandemic. People were working at home. They got this sense of a little bit of like being their own boss. They didn't have to go into the office at a certain time. They could work in their pajamas if they wanted. And it just felt very free to them. So they think, well, maybe I should continue that. I can start my own business. I can set my own hours. I can do what I want.
Now, you have persisted in the face of distraction and easy outs. And I mean, oh my goodness, you have the easiest out ever. You could start consulting to the corporations you used to work for, where so many have failed, or I don't know if you want to call it failing, but they've taken some easier outs. Do you have any suggestion for those who need motivation or reassurance? And I throw in a caveat here. Corporate benefits are valuable, and having insurance when someone in your family gets either an acute or a chronic condition is a lovely thing. So you don't necessarily have to quit your day job overnight. Building a business like Anita's while maintaining or having a spouse or legally recognized partner who has a day job is actually a smart move. But to give some motivation to someone who is giving up for the wrong reasons in their entrepreneurial pursuit, what were some strategies that you took on at harder moments?
So one thing is to always look behind you and measure how far you've come. Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, well, you're.
I know you were speaking metaphorically, but I was wondering who was creeping up behind me. Yeah.
No, but no, you always have to look and measure where you've come from. And that's so important. I jokingly say that I used to send myself reports. Well, actually, it was very true, because a lot of reports, you can tell the software to spit out a report once a week and email it to you, right? So that's sending yourself a report. But I thought that was really important. And what I would do is I would look and I would compare. Let's take something simple like website traffic, okay? So that's a very easy thing to measure, going back and looking at where you've come from. You look at the start and you look at where you are now. You see the line goes up or across, or hopefully not down. But you can usually see progress over time. And so you really have to look backwards. I mean, you've got to do that kind of measurement. You can't just look at where you are today or anything like that. And that is very motivating, because when you see that line go up a little bit, it's like, oh yeah, I am making some progress here. It's great, and then you find one thing you did well, and maybe you do more of that one thing, and then you start seeing little incremental changes. So that's one thing. Another thing is really to celebrate success. You hear that a lot, and it can sound a little trite, but it's so important, so important. And even if you're a business of one, write down the things that were successes for you, or, get a bowl and put a jelly bean in it or something for every success. I don't care how small it is. Now, in my company today, we use a Skype group to communicate because we're, all spread out. And we have a special little group called the success group. So you share your success. If you came across anything at all that was, going on that was very successful, something happened that was really good, you just go ahead and you share it with the team. And then everybody does emojis, like spinning around, dancing and whatever. And everybody feels really good about that one little thing. Exactly.
We're sitting here, you look like a one-person operation, but you just confessed, I not confessed, I know you're very proud of this. You are far from a one-person operation. And I think actually, as much as anyone I know, your success today is from the agency of others, the way you are so good at delegating things to other people. And you do this in spite of, I think you are the only probably the only small biz trans person in Naples, Florida, I think, where I happen to know that you're out riding your bicycle a lot. So how do you do that? Is technology important to that? Is being good at delegation? What matters?
Well, technology, of course, is absolutely essential. I mean, without it, I don't know how we could operate. I mentioned
this is your chance to name names, by the way.
Yeah, well, so first of all, this is something that became crucial this past year, and that is a virtual phone system. Okay, imagine all these small businesses that had to take customer calls and so on, couldn't have employees coming into the office. And if they had an on-premises phone system that was not one that could be expanded to include outside people outside the premises easily, I mean, they were in a world of hurt and they had to really scramble. So that's one of the things that we got early on. I mean, we all have voicemail boxes on a central system, but we're all scattered everywhere. And we're able to, get calls and make calls from it. We can use an app. We can, we can forward information. We get voicemails coming to us in email, for example. And Nextiva, who's our provider, they send that. And it comes to you as an attached voicemail file. And you can very easily forward that to someone anywhere. So, that's just one small example, but it's a really critical one where people don't know that we're scattered when they call in the phone. They're just thinking that we're in some kind of a central facility. Another thing, shared documents, so important, so very important. Any kind of cloud software, that's another thing. I mean, you need a cloud CRM software, you need cloud systems so that people anywhere can connect and see all the information. So that's been essential for us. For us, we've been doing it now for a decade, but I think a lot of businesses over the past year really had to scramble. And then once they did, they feel empowered. It's like freedom, it's like, wow, we could be anywhere. We can have access to anything. We can communicate from anywhere. And I don't think businesses are going to go back entirely to the way things were. I think we're going to see a lot more distributed workforce.
So what is next? I mean, unless it's secret, what is next for small biz trends or for you?
So small business trends, what are we doing? One thing we're really doing, Amazon has become such a big platform.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah, just a little one. But I also think for an information provider like us, we haven't really tapped into it very well. Yeah, I did a book personally, but we're really exploring repurposing some of our content into Kindle books. And, I think that that's a really good thing for us to do. It takes advantage of our core competency, which is creating the content, but it just is putting it in a different form. And more importantly, you can tap into that huge audience of people who are searching for Kindle books. So that's just one example that, of how we try to expand without getting too far away from what we do well. we've learned that we really have to stick closely to what we do well, and we're able to execute a lot faster when we do that. And we're better at it, of course, too, because we know it better. Whereas if we try something really unrelated to what we do, it's been pretty ugly sometimes. So.
Well, thank you so much, Anita. This is Anita Campbell from Small Business Trends, or as some of us lovingly know it, Small Biz, B-I-Z Trends, and that is TRENDS.com. Though knowing Anita, she's gotten every possible misspelling.com as well. And what a treat. Thank you so much. She is also a power user of Nextiva phone products and also NextOS. And what a treat to be with you. And I hope to see you at even in person at a business conference down the road. What do you think about that?
I'm telling you, won't that be something when we get back to going to conferences?
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.